Hi. What a good-looking crowd. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Christa Wessel. I'm the early morning host at All Classical Portland, which, as you know, is 89.9, right? Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad you're here today. When there is a guest conductor on the Symphony's programs, I get the honor of talking with either the guest conductor, if they like, or a musician, if they like. And today, I like this musician. Her name is Martha Long, and she's the new principal flutist of the Oregon Symphony.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Christa.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Martha was actually on All Classical Portland 3 weeks ago, I think.
Something like that. Yeah.
And all I know is that you had been in Portland. You've been living in Portland for 2 weeks at that point. You're very new.
Yes.
And she appeared on the radio and played and spoke, and I was just so smitten with her that I'm looking forward to sharing some of your magnetic personality with the crowd tonight.
Ooh, thank you.
High standard.
Yeah. But as we talked about, the audition for the principal flute job was actually in September 2015. So I was offered the job with the orchestra 13 months ago, but I was living and playing in San Antonio at the time and couldn't just leave that orchestra. So I did play about 10 weeks last season. I spent a lot of time flying back and forth, and I plan to treat myself to a nice vacation with all my frequent flyer miles sometime soon. But now I'm actually living in Portland, and I am full-time in the Oregon Symphony, and I'm so thrilled to be here.
So you were here for, you said, about 10 weeks last year, so you've
Yes.
been here off and on. You've already built a rapport with the members. And in fact, this morning you were telling me you were already serving on an audition committee.
That's right. Yes, we had auditions for the substitute list for flute and clarinet this morning, but I was only involved with the flute audition. So the 3 members of the flute section, Alicia, Zach, and myself, were listening to people who wanted to come play with us. And so we heard each of them play about 5 or 7 minutes of music, and we'll have some new faces in the section whenever we have repertoire that calls for more than 3 flutes, or if somebody wants to take a week off, we can bring someone new in, because we heard a lot of really wonderful flute playing this morning.
Speaking of auditions, I mean, so you said 15 months ago was the audition for your
13,
job? 13
yeah.
months, okay. I always think of auditions as like completely harrowing experiences. Was it for you?
I don't know if harrowing is the right word, but you're on the right track.
Torturous?
Yeah, it's definitely incredibly difficult. And you know, with the flute is one of the most popular instruments, up there with violin and piano. And so you just get so many people competing for one position. And so I've taken auditions that had as few as 40 people, which was awesome. And I've taken an audition that had as many as 382 people competing for one spot. And I've heard about auditions that had even more than that coming. And so the way it works is you send in your resume, and based on your resume, either you get invited to a live audition or not, and then you pay your own way. So everyone. Those 382 people came from all over the world to Chicago in that case.
To play for 5 or 7 minutes,
maybe. Play for 5 or 7 minutes. And from 382, in the case of that audition, they cut it down to 10. So your chances are really not great.
Out of curiosity, what was that audition?
That was for principal flute in the Chicago Lyric Opera.
And you were taking that audition?
Yes, I took that before I won my job in San Antonio. And I am lucky to say that I was one of the 10 who made it. So that was really a really positive experience for me. I didn't make it out of that group of 10, but I made it into the group of 10. And that was really reaffirming for me.
Well, that's interesting, because I would, if you're a more negative type of person, you would think, oh, I didn't make it.
Yeah, I mean,
what's
there's
wrong
that too.
with me?
That thought definitely crossed my mind. But each audition is so different, and I was still in school when I took that audition, actually, and I hadn't yet really gotten to the point of wondering, what am I doing with my life? Is somebody ever going to pay me to play the flute? Although I was getting close. And there were a lot of auditions happening at that time. That was in February of 2012, and there were about, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 auditions at that time. So I spent, my second year in grad school, I was never in the same place for more than 7 consecutive days. I looked at my schedule. I remember going back and looking at it, because there were just all these auditions happening all the time. So I was living out of my suitcase, which my cat loved, because she loves suitcases. I don't know why. And so I spent a lot of time traveling and auditioning, and I actually won my job in San Antonio 2 weeks after I finished grad school. So I was really lucky to go from being in school to walking into an orchestra the following fall and not having a period of unemployment and stress and wonder about whether or not I would ever make it as a flute player.
Out of curiosity, how many auditions do you think you've taken in your life?
I actually keep track, so I can tell you that I've taken 16.
Okay. And how many have you won?
I've won 3 of those. So San Antonio was my 15th, and then Oregon was my 16th. I sort of decided to take this audition. Well, I should back up and say that I have auditioned for the Oregon Symphony 3 times. The first 2 auditions that they had when I was in grad school were in 2010 and 2011. And in 2010, I made it to the semifinals. In 2011, I made it to the finals. And then I saw that this audition was advertised again, and I thought, well, I'm not going to take that. I'm happy here in San Antonio. And then Alicia, the second flutist, actually called me and left me a message because I had been in the finals in one of their previous auditions and asked me to come take it and told me that they could start me in the semifinal round, so I wouldn't have to start in the round with 120 people. I would be pre-advanced to the round with 25 people instead. And so I sort of thought, well, I can't say no to her because she's so nice. So I bought a plane ticket and I came, and it's the 3rd time I won it. And here I am.
Was there any question in your mind that you would give up San Antonio then and take this job? Because some people audition just to kind of keep practice too, right?
Yeah, I didn't really even think about it. I didn't think I was going to win, and my goal was just to get far enough along in the process that maybe someday they would invite me to come play with the orchestra, either as a substitute or on trial for principal or something. But I didn't really plan to. I mean, you can't plan to win an audition because the odds are never in your favor. So I certainly wasn't expecting anything. And then Maestro Kalmar walked into the dressing room and offered me the job, and my first reaction was, really? I was just so confused. It was like everything changed in an instant.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank
In
you.
the concerts I've heard you play in last season, just the tone that you have so beautifully matches the tone of Alicia and Zach. And I don't know, is that part of the audition process to see how well you match with the other players in the section?
I did play with Alicia, and I did play with Marty and Karen, principal oboe and principal bassoon.
As part of your audition?
As part of my audition. Actually, I played with a full wind quintet. So Marty, Karen, John, the principal horn, and then Todd, the associate principal clarinet, played because the principal clarinet audition was like a week or 2 later, so they didn't have a principal clarinet at the time. So I did get to play a little bit with everyone except for Zach, really. And I could tell right away that I loved playing with them, especially with Alicia. Like, having a great second flute player changes everything. And I was playing with her a little excerpt from Ravel's Mother Goose Suite, which has these beautiful sort of dovetailing lines between the first and second flute. It starts with the second flute solo, and then the first flute comes in a couple octaves higher and just sort of floats on top. And I just thought, this is really magical. I would love to do this every day. And now I'm really lucky to do it every day.
I did one of these pre-concert chats with Alicia Paulson last season, 2 seasons ago. I've lost track. And Zach, too, the piccolo player. And all of these pre-concert chats are archived at the All Classical Portland website, thanks to Joe right here who's filming them. And one thing I learned about Alicia is that she's got a beautiful gold flute that has this beautiful warm tone, and she played it during the chat. And then I met you at All Classical Portland on Thursdays at 3 a couple weeks ago, and I noticed that you had a gold flute
Yes.
too. Would you talk about it, show it to us?
Sure.
Let
Yeah.
us
Let
hear
me
it?
get it out.
I can hold the microphone in front of your face.
Great. So I got this flute 2 years ago, and I am very, very happy to have it, and incredibly fortunate to have it. So this is a solid gold flute. That means that the tube is gold and the keywork is gold as well. And it's you can't really tell in this light, but it's rose gold. So if you were to hold it up to Alicia's flute, which has some white gold in it, it would look like a different color. One of my teachers from high school has a yellow gold flute, which does look really different. If you just look at it by itself, it just looks like a gold flute. But if you look at it next to a rose gold flute or something, it looks incredibly different. Thank you. So this is my gold flute. And
So is gold, I know nothing about flutes. Is gold common?
Right. Yeah. Well, so flute players just have so many different options. I think when you play the oboe, you play a Yamaha or you play a Loré, and then you spend your life making reeds. But with flute players, you can have a silver flute, you can get a gold flute, a platinum flute, a wooden flute. You can get any combination of those things. You can get different amounts of silver, different carats of gold, different combinations. And in addition to having so many flute makers out there, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of smaller companies that just make head joints. And then you can mix and match the body of one maker and the head joint of another maker, which is what Alicia has. And so does Zach, actually.
How can you ever decide?
It takes a really long time. And hopefully you just find something that really speaks to you, something that you just never want to put down, something that you don't want to stop playing. And that's what I experienced when I found this flute, and the flutes before this, to be honest. But at a certain point, I outgrew those because I got them when I was a student. But I didn't get this one until I'd been playing professionally for 2 years. So hopefully I'll never have to go flute shopping again, because it took me 2 hours of, I'm sorry, not 2 hours, 2 days of 10 to 5 trying flutes at a national convention with, a football field-sized room of flute makers and head joint makers. And I just spent from 10 a.m. to 5 a.m. 2 days in a row trying everything to see what I liked. And
that's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it was very exhausting. But I walked out of it with this incredible flute. And
was it the case that when you played this one, you were like, the angels sang and you knew it was the flute for you?
A little, yeah. And I had a couple of friends listening to me, one of whom was my flute teacher through middle school and high school, and has heard me play a lot since I graduated high school and went on to college and on to being a professional musician. And I had several friends who are actually professional flutists in other orchestras listening to me. And as soon as I started to play this one, everyone just kind of went, yeah, yeah, that's it. And so I trust their judgment very much.
Well, can we hear this thing?
Sure. Thank you. I'll have to go home and practice that.
You don't play that one very often.
No.
Did I see that you brought another flute?
Yes. So I also have with me my silver flute, because I'm kind of paranoid, so I carry 2 flutes around at all times, just in case something goes wrong. Because there's so many moving, tiny little moving parts on a flute, and they can get out of adjustment. Thank you. They can get out of adjustment really easily, or a pad can rip and then keys won't seal, and things can go wrong. And when I was in the San Antonio Symphony, I had something go wrong with my flute, and I had to borrow a colleague's flute for a concert, which was a little terrifying. So after that, I started carrying 2 flutes at all times, just in case.
So is this then a silver flute?
Yeah, so then this is a solid silver flute.
And is this what you played before, the gold one?
So this flute I got when I was in high school, and I got a different head joint for it when I was in college, but I won my first audition on this flute. Aww. And I got into college, I got into grad school, I went to China with this flute. I have a lot of really great memories with this flute, and sometimes I play it, every now and then just to make sure it works in case I need it in a pinch. So I doubt that any of you came to our David Bowie show last week, but I played it for that.
Because?
Just to know that it works, and so that I'm used to it in case I need to play it on the spur of the moment.
Well, I'm kind of curious as to whether we will hear a difference. If you played that same passage on this, whether we would hear a difference in timbre. Do you hear a difference?
You
I
do?
did too. I think that one sounds brighter. Maybe it's just my imagination.
Probably, yeah. Well, gold is so heavy, it's such a heavy metal that it takes a lot of air to bring brightness to the sound on a gold instrument. So gold flutes are sort of generally considered to have a sweeter sound. And if you give a gold flute to a flutist who's not too advanced, their sound will just kind of get really small. Like, it will get really pretty, but also very small because they just don't have enough air to give the instrument what it needs. That's why, also because they're less expensive, we start younger flutists on silver flutes because they're cheaper, they're not as heavy, they don't take quite as much air to make a good sound.
Huh. And you mentioned that when you went to the flute convention or whatever it was that you went with the football field size.
Place for nerds.
Flute nerds.
Flute nerds. And their spouses.
Their unwilling spouses.
Or in my case, my parents, who got dragged along to a lot of them when I was a kid.
And you mentioned that some makers only make the head joints and some. Is it the case you could play the gold flute with the silver head joint? I mean, how do you know when to stop messing around? And
you don't.
Oh, really?
Well, ideally you find something that really speaks to you, but there are flute players out there who are playing on different combinations of instruments on a monthly basis because they just find something that they like. Zach just found a head joint that he bought at the most recent flute convention. He sent me a text picture of it, and he said, "Look what I did." So you every now and then, if you go flute shopping, you're going to find something that you like better than what you have. So that's why I hope I never have to do it again.
It never occurred to me that there's a flute nerd convention. Was this every year?
Oh, yeah. And that's just in the U.S. I mean, people come from all over the world to go to the United States one, but Britain has its own, Japan has its own, they're everywhere.
And have you been since you've gotten this rose gold flute?
I did. I went back the following year and did a competition, but now I don't go unless I'm shopping or playing, basically.
Probably wise, budgetarily speaking. Yeah, it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
I revealed to you, kind of spur of the moment, during your Thursdays at 3 performance a couple weeks ago up at All Classical Portland. She played this beautiful Saint-Saëns romance, and it nearly brought me to tears. I could not believe I was nearly brought to tears because I'm not too ashamed to admit I'm not a big fan of the flute. And I admitted that to you. I said, you brought me to tears, and I couldn't believe it because I've never considered myself a flute fan. So there's something about your playing that really moves me, but I'm wondering what it was that brought you to the flute. How did you find the flute?
Well, thank you. That's very complimentary. So I started on the piano when I was 4 years old, and it was terrible. I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to read bass clef, and my teacher would give me bass clef quizzes every single week. And this went on for 4 years, and I couldn't figure it out. And it got to the point where I had one of those little egg timers that sat on top of the piano to time how long I was practicing, and I would make it go faster, so somehow 30 minutes would turn into 15 or 10, and my mom caught on and put the timer on the microwave, which was digital. And I would start hiding under the furniture when it was time to go to lessons, and my parents let me take a break for one summer when I was like 6 or 7, but then it was back to the piano. And finally, when I was 8, my mom said, why don't we try a different instrument? Why don't we try an instrument that only plays in treble clef? So, my options were like violin, flute, oboe, clarinet. And I don't really know what part of me chose the flute, because I was such a tomboy as a kid. Like, I was into cars and sports, and I'm one of 3 girls, but I was sort of like the boy of the family, and somehow I chose the flute, which is so stereotypically girly, and at least in the United States. In Europe, men play the flute. And it just stuck sort of right away. I took to it, and I really liked it, and I had a great teacher from the time I was 8. And then when I was in 8th grade, I placed into the North Carolina All-State Middle School Band. So all of a sudden, I got this, external reinforcement that I was actually good at this for my age. And it was like this light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, I like this, and I'm good at it, and I could do it for the rest of my life if I keep practicing. Cool. So I don't really know how I ended up with the flute, but it
was obviously the right
thing. It worked,
thing.
yeah. Which is funny, because now I think I admitted to you at Thursdays at 3 that the flute is not my favorite instrument either. Like, if I'm gonna sit down and listen to music, it's not gonna be the flute. It's gonna be like Beyonce. And, but it's my tool for making music with my wonderful colleagues, and it's my voice in the orchestra, and I love playing it, but I'm not going to sit down and listen to it.
I love that you just admitted that you listen to Beyonce.
I do.
That makes me so happy. I feel like sometimes classical music fans get pigeonholed as only liking classical music. Far from it.
I can't dance to save my life, but I like things that aren't classical music. I love folk music like Punch Brothers, and jazz, and Beyonce and Rihanna. Now I'm showing my lack of
it's good.
pop culture knowledge.
Based on, I knew this would probably come up since we would be talking about Thursdays at 3, and you'd mentioned Beyonce on the air, which I thought was very brave of you. But I spent the day listening to Beyonce too and thinking about you, and so thank you.
Great, you're welcome.
You mentioned North Carolina. Is that where you were born and raised?
Yeah, that's where I grew up. Christa was actually on WCPE, which was our local radio station in North Carolina, so my parents recognized her name and her voice. And I grew up in Chapel Hill, and I stayed there until I went to college. And
Which was where?
I started at the Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio, and then I transferred to the Colburn School in Los Angeles, and that's where I finished my undergraduate degree. And then I went to the New England Conservatory in Boston, and straight from Boston to San Antonio, Texas, which was a little alarming.
Culturally, a bit different?
Yeah, it's very different.
You mentioned that you started at Oberlin but transferred. Is there a story there? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, so when you play an instrument, when you go to school for an instrument, the most important thing is your relationship with your primary teacher. So in my case, with my flute teacher. And Oberlin had so many wonderful things that I loved so much about it. I had a great group of friends, and I got good part assignments in the orchestra, and I got to go on this tour to China, and I got to play at Carnegie Hall when I was there. But I just didn't have the right flute teacher for me when I was there, and that 1-hour lesson a week was enough to make me really miserable, honestly. And it was enough to drown out all the positive things that I was experiencing there. So it took me a long time, because I was there for 5 semesters, actually. It took me a long time to get up the courage to decide to leave, because Oberlin is such an incredible institution, and I thought there just must be something wrong with me, not with the teacher, because he was this incredible professor who was world-renowned. But finally, I just realized that it wasn't right for me, and I had to go. And it was one of the scariest things I've ever done, but I'm so glad that I did it, because I got to go to Los Angeles and study with Jim Walker, who is like, one of my friends described him once as a biker Santa Claus who also plays the flute. Like, he is hilarious, and he cares so much about every single student that he has. And in my first lesson with him, I had my flute out, like before he opened the door, I had my flute out and put together, and I had like 3 etudes prepared, and I was ready to go, and I had all these excerpts and everything, and he opens the door and he invites me in, and he says, "Sit down," and starts asking me questions about myself and questions about what I wanted to achieve in my career and where I wanted to be in 5 years and in 10 years, and had I done any competitions? Did I want to do any competitions? Had I taken any professional auditions? Did I want to? Did I like playing the piccolo? No. In other things, he was taking time to get to know me, which my teacher at Oberlin just never did. And so Jim changed my life. Studying with him changed my life, and it's really because of him that I'm here today, because I was this close to quitting the flute.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. It's all about the teacher.
Yeah. Well, it's very much about the teacher. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Do you teach?
I do. I don't have any students yet because I just moved here.
Yeah.
But I had some wonderful students when I was in San Antonio, and I also coached a flute choir, which was loud. But they were very cute. It was worth it, definitely. Yeah, and I love teaching. I love helping someone explore music and become a better flute player and become a better musician and hopefully a better person. And I don't feel that my students need to follow in my footsteps or become orchestral musicians themselves. I just want them to have fun playing the flute. So we have a lot of fun in lessons. We play lots of duets and make lots of jokes. We had jokes. We talked about jokes, but I think we'll have plenty to talk about without telling you jokes.
Oh, no. I told you my favorite joke the other day, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to hear my favorite joke? Knock, knock. To whom?
She got you.
I love that joke. In all seriousness, though, I'm thinking back at the beginning of our chat when you were talking about all the auditions you took in your professional career. You mentioned that you won 3. I'm thinking San Antonio and Oregon.
And Fort Collins, which was Fort Collins, Colorado. It's a beautiful little town, and I won my first professional audition there when I was still an undergrad student at Colburn. Fort Collins is a regional orchestra, so that means that they play less than 10 weeks a year, fewer than 10 weeks a year. Less than?
Just ask me to knock-knock joke and I'll answer it the right way.
My mom is a Latin teacher, and she's going to know the answer to that one. So I flew out to Colorado 1 week a month to play with them, starting my senior year of undergrad and continuing through my graduate work. And my plan after I finished in Boston was to move to Colorado and learn to ski and get a dog and do all sorts of fun things. And then I won my job in San Antonio. And my first thought that went through my mind when that happened was, oh, so I'm moving to Texas. Oh, not Colorado. Very different. But I was thrilled to have every opportunity to play that ever came my way. So
It sounds like you've bounced all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
Stay here for a while, okay?
I would love that.
Okay. If you have any flute players in your life, tonight's chat has been recorded and will be posted on the All Classical Portland website tonight, so you can view it. Or send your friends to the chats tomorrow afternoon or Monday night. Martha and I will be doing this. We'll be talking about some other things too, your love of languages, and
Sure.
we'll dive into some other topics as well. So thank you for coming tonight. It's going to be a fantastic concert. Oh my goodness, we didn't even talk about that. But this is Martha Long, the principal flutist of the Oregon Symphony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert is my dear friend, but Christa's the best.